how you guys know about this workshop? Yeah, is it through the email? And for those who are not XMUM, how you guys know about this workshop? I saw like Cheng Hong, right? You're not XMUM student. So how you know about this event? Yes, through email. Okay. Have you guys watched the Python 101? Because we have organized one in 2020 email. Okay. So it's 9:06 now. We are going to start. First, I will going to introduce you our speaker, and I will pass the floor to them. Good morning, everyone. This is the Python 102 programming workshop organized by XMUM Tech Club. And to introduce you a little bit about our speaker, Jia Hong, which is my classmate also. He is a fourth-year software engineering student, and he started coding since 2015 to solve maths competition question. You know, every time I have any question regarding programming in class, I will approach him because he will patiently answer all my question, and yeah, he really is a like programming god for me. Okay, so in XMUM, he joined student research team and did even more coding. He also have some experience at teaching programming and assisting in debugging, like I said just now. Okay, in this workshop, he will share some basic programming and debugging techniques and that he used, and also introduce basic object-oriented programming concept. Before I pass the floor to him, please scan this QR code below to get in touch with us through Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, because we will upload this recording to YouTube. So if you want to look back, or if you're interested in more of our other events, you can also subscribe to the channel to watch the recording. So yeah, now, hi Jia Hong, you want to say hi to everyone?
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Okay. So hello everyone.
Yes. Jia Hong, then I'll pass the floor to you now.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So before I start, so how many people here are like new to programming in general? Let me share my screen. Okay, so here 2, 3, anyone? Anyone else new to programming? So okay, 4. Oh, okay, there are quite a number of them. Okay, so let's start the talk, which is the programming tips for beginner. But I actually kind of don't like this title because it's implying me like some kind of pro people. So let's change this a little bit. How I do programming and debugging. Okay, she already introduced me, so I will skip this. So here's the outline of this workshop. The first session, I will do a quick recap on Python, and then share how I do programming and debugging, share some tips, and then we will proceed to workshop problem. In session 2, we will learn something about object-oriented programming, and we will develop a simple board game. And since there are many people didn't learn programming before, I will like be a bit slower. Is that okay?
Yes, it will be fine.
So okay, so let's start. Python weekly type interpreter programming language, which means all variable you set in Python, you don't need to specify its type. And because its syntax is similar with English, so it's considered a very beginner-friendly language. So let's start with variable. Variable, which is a thing that can hold a value. So for example, in this case, and if you just remember, the name integer is referred to 10. So here it will give me 10. And a variable name cannot be keywords, like later we'll learn about more. Like we cannot assign if the value to if, because if is reserved by Python. They have usage for it, and cannot start with any special character except underscore, and cannot start with a number. And a variable can be deleted, so I can just ask the interpreter to delete integer, and it will forget the name. You see here. Please just tell me to stop if you feel like you are not following. That's okay. Just open your mic and say anything. Okay, the next one, operator, plus, minus, multiply, division, and modulo. The first four you should be quite familiar with. I will just focus on the last one. Modulo is an operation of getting the remainder of division. So if you divide 8 by 3, you get 2 and a remainder 2. So it will give, sorry, it will give me 2. Or other example, 18 over 5, it could give me 3, because 5 times 3 is 15, and 18 minus 15 is 3. And double asterisk gives the power operation, so like 2 to the power of 10, 1024. And double slash gives the integer division, which will drop anything behind the point. So behind the point, it will be dropped, even is 0.9. 19-bit division 10 give me 1. It's actually 1.9, but it will drop anything like behind the decimal point. And Python also have some less used operator like bitwise and or and shifting. So we will not go into that. So is that okay, operator? Someone raise hand, is that okay? Hong Xuan Ling. Okay. So let's proceed. Making decision. So remember I say if cannot be assigned a value is because if is reserved by Python to do decision. So let's say if anything, maybe 3 plus 2 or 5. And you might notice that the equal here is a bit weird. I will explain it later. So in Python, after you write like if something, you need to put a colon and then a tab. The tab is necessary because Python don't have the in other language, if you use these two, I don't know what they call, bracket to like distinguish the scope. So it will tell that this scope belong to if or belong to a global scope. But Python don't have this, so it completely rely on the tab to know which part the code is belongs to. And if you do like this, it will give me an intention error. So let's do it the proper way. At the tab, it pretty high because 3 plus 2 is 5. So the code inside this will be executed. Let's, you can also use a variable inside the decision. So if 3 plus 2 is 5. If is a like a short form of else if. Else if you can follow it by another expression. So in this case, this will not execute. So please be note that if you have two, when you have two expression that's considered the same, only the first one will be executed. So it's like code goes here, code find out this is true, and it goes here, and it will ignore everything else. Is that okay? Oh, okay. Thanks. And let's talk about else. So else will include a statement that will be executed if everything like in front of it is failed. So here in this example, because this is false, this line will not be executed. So it will go straight to else and print a EA screen. Yeah, just like that. It's basically if else. And since Python 3.10, they introduced a new thing, match case, which is basically switch case if you have learned programming before. Maybe at 3.10. Yeah, 3.10. So because this interpreter I use here is 3.8. I have the two version of it installed on my machine, so I cannot demonstrate a match case here. So let's try. It will just give me an error. Here it should be okay. Yeah, see, version method. Basically, match after a match it expect an expression, and after a case it expects some value. X. And case underscore means a default case, which is if everything else fail, it will goes to the case underscore. So kind of similar with else. So in this example, because this case will fail, so it should print a default on screen. Yeah, see. And match case is actually more than that. So if you are interested, you can visit this link and learn more about it. Okay, shall we proceed? Is everything fine? So yeah, anyone here didn't install Python on your computer? Oops. Okay, I messed it up. So if you Google Python, the first link should link you to the official website and you can download it. And double click should start the installation. Yeah, because I already installed, so it will tell me to upgrade. Do you need help? Oh, okay. There's also okay. Or you can Google Python or anything, and it should give you a website that you can write code in. So can you proceed?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Where was the logical operator? Okay, including and or not is in. So if you have two expressions and we train them with and or not these three things, they will perform the corresponding operation. Like let's say we have 3, 2, 5, and it's give me a true because both statements are true. So if one of them is false, it will just give me false. And you can also use this operator in if, like if like 6%. Yeah, you can use it in if this n. So n will only give true if both of the statements are true, or you will give true if one of the statement is true. So even though this statement is false, the second one is false, it will still give me true because the operator is for. And not we will just inverse the like the logical value. Not true will be false, not false will be true. Simple. And let's talk about is and in. It will be a bit more complicated. Is check if two operand is referring to the same object. And if you are not familiar with programming, you just need to think it as like same value. Yeah, like that. Let's say a is 3. Variable a is 3. We will now check a is 3. True. So please bear in mind that is and the compare operator are not the same thing. So it gives me a warning here. Because it is a bit more complicated than that. But if you are new to programming, you probably can't understand. So let's just remember this is basically equal, but it's more than that. Okay. I'm really worried about those like new to programming. Okay, so in will check if the left hand side is inside right hand side. So in Python we have something called a collection, which is like a set of value, and in operator will check if a value you give on the left hand side of it is inside on the collection at the right hand side. So let's check if 5 is in this. It should be false because 5 is not inside the list here. But if you give any number inside like 1 in this, it will give you true. So this operator will check if it is inside the list or not. Logical
Hi,
comparison.
Jiahong.
Yes.
There's a question from the chat box. It's asking
Okay.
what's the difference here.
Okay. Let's talk about reference. So let me get my pen. So in Python, you have two things basically. You have a variable name, and it's basically a pointer to the actual object here. A double equal comparison operator will compare the value. So here, compare if two variables have the same value. And the is operator, if compare the arrow, are they pointing to the same thing? So let's give an example. Let's give this A, 2, 3, and this B equal this A. So this, in this example, this A is this B is true. But if I make this B, even if I wrote the exact same thing, it becomes false. Because what I did here I assign this B as a arrow pointing to the same list here. But if I write it again, Python, if you think the two lists is different thing, even though they have the same value. So even though list A is not list B, they still consider they have the same value but different object. So a bit complicated things. Is that okay? Or let's see another example. So let's do things again. List A is this thing. List B equal list A. So if list A is list B, you do some if you do any modification on list A, list B will change as well because they are referring to the same thing. So in this particular case, list A is a error. So 1, 2, 3 is here. And now list B is pointing to the same thing. So if you modify list A, will you modify this thing? List B will be affected because they are pointing to the same thing. Okay. So if you do it like that, then this B will pointing to another object with the same value. Let's just copy paste here. So Python consider list A, not list B. And if they are not the same thing, if you modify list A, this B will not be affected because you are modifying this thing, the top one, and bottom one is remain unaffected. So is that okay? Okay, great. Okay, let's back to logical comparison. This should be quite intuitive, like greater or equal, compare, like equal, smaller equal, and smaller. So greater equal, we will check if the left hand side is greater or equal to right hand side. And greater will check if left is greater than right. And double equal will just check if they are the same value. So it should be quite easy. Okay, before we go into loop, is everything okay?
It's okay for me.
Oh, okay, great. So if you have difficulty, please raise your hand and tell me where you don't understand. I can just repeat it.
No problem.
No problem. Okay. Okay, so I will proceed. So loop is basically like keywords to tell Python to do something repeatedly. So, well, an expression, do something, and very important, do something that make the loop stop. So let's see if we don't. Let's see, well, true, print high. So guess what will happen? It will just repeatedly print high forever and never stop. Oh, by the way, I press Ctrl C to interrupt the infinite loop. So this is important. Please keep in mind, if you are using val, please do something that stop the loop. So let's see a proper example. Let's give a value I equal to 0. Well, I is smaller than, let's say, 5, print I. And increase the value of I. Okay, so the plus equal sign is basically same as equal I plus 1. It's just a short form. You can also write like this, it's okay. So let's check here, expression, do something that can stop the loop. This should end well. Yeah, like that. Okay, then use plus plus. Oh, there's one thing I don't like in Python. You cannot do a plus plus here. There's just one thing I don't like. So for those that are new to programming, plus plus is an operator in other language that will increase the value by 1. So I plus plus in other language, if you just add the value of I plus to one more. Like if I is 5, after I plus 1, it will be 6. Okay. So let's proceed. And besides to let the loop like enter terminate normally, you can also use this to loop control. Break will terminate the loop immediately, and continue will just skip to the next iteration. Let's see an example. Let's reset the value of I to 0 first, and about I smaller than 5. Yeah. And let's give a conditional break. If I is 3, break. Guess what will happen? So break will, yeah, it will stop at when. Okay. So while I is smaller than 5, it will print I, and if I, the value of I is 3, it will break the loop. So the loop will print 0, okay, pass 1, pass 2, pass 3, and it will satisfy the condition, and it will break the loop. So even though we set the loop condition to smaller than 5, it will stop when I is 3. I forget to increase the value of I. Okay, now it will stop at 2. I think it's 2. Yeah. So is that okay? Break. Continue will do a similar thing, but it will just skip the iteration when I equal 3. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, because I print before the continue. So the continue has actually no effect here. So this one thing in programming, the sequence of your code is matter. So even the same code, I just adjust the sequence. It will have different behavior. Is that okay?
Can you show me how you make the unlimited loop with a lot of highs?
Oh,
I just want to look at how you type that thing out. Yeah.
simply value print high. Like this, it will print like a lot of high.
I see. Okay.
Okay. Okay, so the next looping. For loop compared to while is a bit more safer because it guaranteed will be ended for a variable inside a collection if you do something. So like let's say this 1, 2, 3. For any variable inside the list. Yeah. And there are two built-in function that are also widely used when using for. One is called range and one is called length. Length will just get the length of a collection. So 5 here. And range will like give you a range of numbers depend on how you call it. So let's say rank 7. Okay, here I say is the quote-unquote list because in Python it's actually a range object, but it sometimes behaves similarly to a list. So it's it will give me things like this. So is that okay? So about collection, basically they are just a set of values. Like, but Python provide 3 kind of collection: a list, tuple, and dictionary. So this is mutable. It means a list can be modified. So here I just modify the first value of the list to 999. But if you put it inside a parenthesis, it will be a tuple. And you cannot modify it anymore. It gives you an error. And dictionary is basically something you can use your own index. So I can even use a string as an index. Is that okay? So actually you don't need to memorize all of this. Like most of the time you end up just Googling it. You just need to, if you don't like fully understand it, you just need to remember there are things like this. And when you need to use it, you refer to Google. So for example, if you, for dictionary, you don't need to memorize like all these syntax. You just need to remember Python provides something that allow you to use your own index. And when you need to use it, you just Google it. And slicing. similar things here. Similarly, Python provides a slice function, so it gives you the ability to get a part of the list. And negative index gives you the last index, last element inside the list. And you can reverse a list with a negative step. Python provides this syntax. Yeah, I'm actually really worried about you guys. So are you guys okay? Maybe I rushed a bit. Yes, thank you. Maybe I rushed too much thing into slide. Okay, so anyway, let's skip the rest of thing. Let's skip to how I do programming. So later workshop, if you have any problem in writing Python code, you can just ask me. It's okay if you don't know the syntax. If you know the logic, you can write the code with simple Google or something. So shall we proceed? Still okay with you?
Yes, okay.
So basically programming, a process of understanding the problem from your solution and convert the solution to code. And we can meet a various of problem when you are doing these things. So I have concluded some of my thought process when I am doing programming, and this session I will share with you. So I usually understand problem through these five things: input, output, assumption, constraint, and test cases. So input is basically what do I have? Just anything the question provided. Input, like input data and concept, like in math competition, sometimes they just make up some string concept and ask you to solve it. Or sometimes they just give you a scary formula and ask you to do the thing. So concept refer to this. Output assumption. Output is what the question expect you to do. In programming, they can also refer to a behavior like create a new file or make your computer make a noise or play a song, not necessarily something print on screen. Assumption is something you can do safely. So if the question say, you can assume user will input a positive integer, that means you can just like treat it as a positive integer without any safety, without any validation. Not all question will give you a constraint. So sometimes you are just allowed to do anything. And test cases is actually quite important. It can be a simply pair of input and expected output. And it can be useful when you are testing a program. So try to solve the question asked using a paper and pen and observe your own action. This will give you some insight on the actual solution. So here's an example question. A region is a set of same symbols that are vertically or horizontally adjacent with each other. For example, this array has 4 regions, 1 at, 2 x, and 1 star. And it asks you to write a program to count the number of 1 region, L region, and I region in the following array. By the way, this is the following array. So you don't need to solve this question. You just need to understand it. understand the input, output, assumption, constraint, and test cases. So any thought? Okay, how do I see the chat with this? So what is the input? Maybe we should proceed. So in this example, the input is just the following array, like this thing. And it also gives you a concept of region. And output is the number of this region. It did not impose any constraint, and you can assume the array only consists of one, I and L. Test case is also provided inside the question. So this how I understand the question. So if you have any question, please just stop me, okay? So let's talk about forming solution. After understand, I usually proceed to try to form a solution. But before that, you actually want to Google it first. Because programming is not a new thing. So if you are meeting any problem, there's very likely other people already solve it, and they might post their solution somewhere on the internet. Usually when I Googling, I just follow this format. The language or the framework I'm using, the things I'm trying to do, and any constraint assumption. Like if I don't show a list without calling short function. And you might think you just can copy and paste, but before then, make sure you understand it, because later you might need to debug. So it's really important to understand the code. For a complex problem, it makes sense to break it down into several steps. Like if you cannot do things in one go, you need to just like break down into something that you can solve it easily. And breaking down a problem is kind of like peeling an orange. Sometimes you guess different step, like different shape of the orange, and sometimes you get another orange inside the orange. And it kind of makes sense. It's like sometimes you get a can inside another can. And this refers to the recursion solution. So if the problem can be broken down into several steps, by step I means they have a clear input, output, constraint, and assumption. And even better if you have a test case. If yes, you can solve it by step. And by step, I'm referring to these two steps. Like this is just my personal opinion. Feel the step, a step that make assumption true. Like if you short an array, you can always assume the smallest thing will be at the front, and the element will at the very end of the array. Here the state is something that you obtain a new information, like you just do calculation, and it might contribute to another decision making or anything. And sometimes when you try to break down a problem, it gives you another smaller version of the problem itself. And if it gives you a smaller problem and you have a test case, which is a simple enough version of the problem, you can solve it via recursion. And talking about recursion itself is not complicated, but the way of using it is very flexible. Dynamic programming, backtracking, divide, conquer, and so on. So we will not cover it in the workshop. And after you break down the problem, you can proceed to solve every simple problem. I define simple as these two things. So a problem that you know how to solve, you can just implement a solution. Or the problem that you can just brute force your way out. So if the finite and discrete output, and you can verify the correctness, and it don't take too much time. I usually just brute force my way out. And after you solve every single problem, you can just proceed to just combine. You break the problem into some form of structure. You have solution of each part, and you can just put them together, and you will get a working solution. And here is probably the most useful part. Translating your solution into code. Many people would meet the difficulty in this phase. Like they know, they intuitively know how to solve a problem, but they don't know how to convert it to a code. And I just do like this. Like just rephrase my solution until it uses only some limited words. And the limited words I refer to keywords like operators and existing function and so on. I usually start from rephrase the operation first, and then I try to identify data. So speaking of operation, there are actually just 3 types of operation inside a program. One is do something, and make decision, and repeatedly do something. And do something, I refer to something achievable by keywords or operator or existing function. Usually I will just Google it. And make decision, you can base on some variable or based on some comparison that we covered before, the operators and comparisons. Repeatedly do something is a bit more complicated. The first one is recursion. Let's not talk about that. Do while, which is not inside Python. Python did not provide this. When you're looping, needs to be executed at least one time. So there are something you want to do repeatedly that you need it to be done at least one time. And if you know exactly how many times you want the things to be done, you can use for. And other than that, you just use while. And after identify operation, we can proceed to identify the data or variables you need to use. If you need to do something, you have a subject to do it. You make decision, there is something inside the expression. You want to repeat until some condition, there is something inside the condition. And this implies variables. And sometimes a variable, sometimes a call to function that returns something, which is still variable in some sense. And when to function, function is used when you do something repeatedly. When you use a verb repeatedly, you can just reuse you can just create something then reuse the operations. Is that okay? I don't understand what this question is about. Oops.
This one is referring to the example just now. Like before
Like all the
you
way out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first example you have introduced.
Yeah, that is the point. That is the point of this example, a complicated example, and try to understand it. So
Yeah, could you explain again for this example?
yeah. Okay. Basically, this problem asks you to count something called region, and it also define region for you. So the input, so you want to write a program that take this scary looking array and count the thing inside the array. And the thing is a vertically or horizontally adjacent with each other. Same symbol that is like this. So for example, in this small array, these symbols are adjacent to each other, so they are counted as one region. And the x, although it's really close with this x, but it's not vertically or horizontally adjacent. So they are not neighbors. So they are counted as two regions, including this part and this part. Is that okay? So input is this thing. Okay, understand. Input is this thing, and it gives you the concept region, and it wants you to count the region. And because the wording of the program, you can just assume that the following array, the scary looking array, only consists of 1, I, and L. And when you start coding, you can just like, no need to validate if there are any other character inside the array. Is that okay? Okay. Great. So here's a second example. Try to translate the solution into something like code. I will usually start with identify operation. So here, the problem is to input a number and then output all its rotation. So 1, 2, 3, 4 will become 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 2, 4, 1, 2, 3. You can assume the input is always positive integer, so no any form of validation is needed. And my solution is repeatedly rotate the number and then print it until the number becomes the original input again. So start with identify operation. Repeat until the modified number is same as the original input. So at this point, we already identified two potential variables. Print the modified number and rotate the modified number. And since we identify variables, we can include inside the solution. Create variable original, get user input and store it in original. Create variable number, rotate the original, store in number. and loop until number is same as original again. Print and rotate the number. And you can see the verb rotate is repeating. So it implies a function. Let's define the function. It takes a number and basically it just moves the first digit to the end. Now let's try to break down move to the end. The variable first digit. We first get the first digit for number, store it in the variable we created. Remove the first digit from number and insert it at the end. At this point, you can already argue that it's already simple enough since the data type string provide this operation to support what you are trying to do. But if storing it inside integer, you need to do a bit more complicated process. And so here is the code. So that's how I convert my solution into code. I just repeatedly identify the operation, identify the data I need to use. And eventually, if you become simple enough, then I can just write code based on it. So is that okay? Reverse this one. So this is the slicing. Okay, yeah, okay. This is the slicing operation we talked before. But if you don't remember the actual syntax, you just Google the things. But eventually we'll be familiar enough to just write it out. So quick recap. Understanding form solution, translate code, understand IOCAT. Form solution just break down. It can be break down into step or recursion. Solve the simple problem by know how to do, or just go forward your way. Googling, I usually follow this format. Translate to code, repeat it, rephrase, start with operation, and then data, and then repeat until it's easy enough. Okay. So let's take a short break here. In between, you try to think about this. You don't need to write code. You just need to break down the problem and identify the operation like this. You don't need to write code. You just need to understand and give some solution. Let's take 10 to 15 minutes break here. So this workshop actually kind of assume the audience will have some programming experience but need help in problem solving. So when I heard that there are people they are completely new to programming, I'm really worried about them. So is everything okay? Hopefully everything is okay. So let's meet again in 10:25 or 20. I don't think I have too much time. Let's meet in 20. It's all clear. Okay, thank you. Let's meet again in 10:20, and in between you can like take a breakfast and try to give your solution. I will give my solution later, so you don't need to actually solve this. We are not in the workshop yet. Okay. So hi again. It's me again. Right. Okay. I hope you have your solution, and here's my solution. So from the question, we know that input is a string and output, there are few possible outputs here. Like which player have won or draw, which player's turn, or the input is incorrect. And first I break down the so-called filter step first. So here. First step, I want to ensure the board is legit. So it's like this shape here. And proceed, I want to ensure the position is legal before I check the game is ended or in progress. And if I know the game is, if I filled out the game is ended, I want to check if it has a winner or no winner. Okay. So the board is legit means we need to check the shape is like this. And the question mark means the X or O or space. So can you give me a illegal position in tic-tac-toe? So how do I see chat here? Two. So let's say we have a tic-tac-toe. Usually we start with X. And then another player give a O, X. Yep, it has illegal position, like this. This is definitely illegal because like the X player just get to move, but the O. Understand? Yeah. So we identify the first rule for a legal position. The number for X is either, okay, let's go back a bit. So at this point is legal. At this point is legal. This point is legal. X is 1 more than O. Is legal. X and O has the same number. This point is still legal. X is 1 more than O. And now it's illegal. So we can conclude that a legal position has number of X equal number of O or number of O plus 1. Okay, so is this sufficient? Let's think. Is this legal? Up to this point is legal, but now O already won. Can X have a move now? Can X get another move after O has already won? No. So we have the second condition, no to winner. Satisfy both conditions, the position is illegal, otherwise it's illegal. Okay, so how we identify the game has ended or still in progress? Well, obviously, if there is one winner, then the game has ended. But there's also a case that there is no winner, but the game is also ended, which is when the board is full. So if there is at least one winner, the game is ended. Otherwise, if the board is full, the game is still ended. Easy? Now, how to identify there is a winner or no? Well, actually, when you have know there's at least one winner, you can just tell there has a winner. So actually, this filter step we identified before is redundant. So here is what I identified before when I'm writing the program. And conveniently, after you identify the filter step and the condition for them, you also identify your gather step. So this thing here, this thing inside the circle is something you want to gather. It's information you want to learn about. You want to extract from the original input. So at this point, you actually start forming your pseudocode solution. So if the shape or input is invalid, then it's incorrect board. If this condition fail, it's the illegal position. No more than one winner is a bit tied to the at least one winner. So you need to check if X won, check if O won, and check if both player won. So this can be break down furthermore. At least one winner, check if X won or O won. So because this filter step, we have this filter, we know that there is no both winner. So we can just safely return when we check X is 1 and don't need to think about if O1 then position illegal or something else. You already do beforehand. And if board is full, there's no winner. And if number of X is equal to number of O, is X turn, else is O turn. Oops, typo. So after breakdown and of this, you actually have your solution already. But please bear in mind that even go through all of this, you might still miss something. So for example, the input is a string. So it's actually quite difficult to tell if two characters are on the same row or column, or so how to check one when coding it. Yeah, that's difficult when it's string. So we need to convert an input to a 3x3 list before we start checking. And when you convert it to a 3x3 list, you can quite easily just iterate through a row, check if there are 3x, iterate through a column, check if are 3x, and so on. Yeah, that's a good question. And where is my, yeah. So after breakdown, after this point, it's actually start to depend on your like knowledge on the language or the platform you're using. So so for example, because I know something called a regular expression, so for me, the validated shape is this two line. And if I don't know, I will need to maybe break down it furthermore. Yeah. And you can see all my code is just implementing what I'm doing inside the pseudocode. Count the x. If x is more than one more, or they are not equal, is a legal position. Here convert to 3x3 list. Actually, I just Google the things and it gives me this kind of code. And count the x and o of each row. Check if row, column, or diagonal has 3x and o. And go all the way down like this. This is the same as array, right? It's the same as array. But Python list, if you are referring to C array, then it's actually no, because Python list you can append. It's more similar with vector. But yeah, generally you can just treat it as array. So this quite complicated example here. It's okay if you don't understand. The virtual problem is quite simple. This in Python has more function. I see your code, I want to cry. Yeah, don't worry about it. One day you will, like, if you keep practice, one day you will, like, stronger than me. This in Python has more function. Well, yes. Like, where's my interpreter? Here. Let's create a list first. So in C, after you define an array, you cannot change the size, but in Python, you can change the size by appending maybe 999. Like see here, I just add one more element at the end. This is what in C the array cannot do, but C provides another thing called vector. Actually, C++ provide things called vector, also as append function. Okay, so before go to workshop, I want to share more about how I do debugging. So we have various steps in programming. We can make various mistakes during the phase. And usually we say there are three types of error. Syntax error, maybe you forget a colon. The interpreter will just throw an error there. Runtime error, when an error occurs during program runtime. And logical error, you make your incorrect solution. But I will personally add 2 more. You misunderstand the problem and you have wrong expectation. Like you Google and it tells you a function, you think the function do A, but it actually do B. And generally, I just follow this flow to do debugging. Locate, identify, eliminate, propagate, and test again. By propagate, I means if the fix affect anything else, or maybe I copy paste the code in many places in my code and I need to fix all of them, or I can just optimize something else like that. And depends on the info you have, the details of the first 2 steps can be a bit different. So if you have error message, it will be really helpful. The compiler or interpreter will point out where the error occurred. And the root cause can be anywhere before that. Like you make mistake like before the line, the compiler check and figure out the error. Maybe you have a wrong data type, but you declare a variable with wrong data type, but you never use the variable until maybe 1,000 lines later. And compiler will tell you when it checked the type when you first use it, and not when declare the variable. And identify, you just read the error message. It's quite easy when you have error message. And if you don't have error message, that will be a bit more challenging. You need to first figure out the pathway your program has taken. Like here, your program can have multiple pathway, and you need to figure out which path the program has taken. And then identify, you need to compare the expected behavior and the actual behavior. That's where the test case come into handy. So you have an input and the expected output, and if you test your program and the output is different, then you can use the difference to identify where the error is. With the information you find out by comparing these two, you need to find out which line might contribute. Like if the incorrect things from a variable, you need to figure out which line of code that use the variable has mistake there. So there is also something called debugger, a tool help you locate the bug. And you need to install it. Usually you need to install and set up it to use. And now I will demonstrate how to use. So generally, to use a debugger, you need to set a breakpoint. So you tell the debugger, once the program executes until this point, you stop and let me have control. Debug. So here, stop here. And it did not finish the program. So let's introduce something. Here are the variable lists. So you can see the value of your variable here. So for example, I have the input look like this. And here, this button gives you control on the execution. Watch is something you can type an expression. For example, I want to know the list I created. So I just type TTT inside here. At this point, because the program haven't reached here, so it don't recognize the name, but it's okay. Later it will know. And call stack is the path your program has taken, but it only know the function you call. So the error is more useful sometimes. This button gives you control on the execution, like you can assist to execute next line. And you can see this variable info here. So look, after this line, I have the value of TTT on my watch list. So it turns out that this code Google gave me are correct because the input just and the TTT are same. So XOX, OOX, XXO, they're same. So I can ensure that TTT is correct up until this point my program are correct. And so on, I can continue and search for a bug. So is that okay? Debugger require you to set it up and maybe use a integrated development environment. So there's also another thing programmer just widely use. Just print everything. Like the functional debugger is just like tells you which pathway the program is taken and tells you the value of each variables. You can achieve it like when you enter a function, you just print the function name. This will achieve something similar with the stack call. And after some execution, you just print the value. And then this will tell you the value of your variables. So if you are like maybe too lazy to set out a debugger, you can just insert print everywhere. So is that okay? And here is something I want to share, but I don't have like a suitable place to insert it. Something about share resource. Like sometimes when you need to use a share resource like a global variables or variable passed by reference in C, or you are just doing something with file or do something with hardware, you might subject to something called side effect. So if you make change to a shared resource, everything else that using the resource, like using the same global variable, will be affected. And this can be very hard to detect inside your program, even though you use a debugger. So yeah, this from my personal experience. So if you are using global variable or you are using a shared resource, please keep extra, like be extra careful about it. They are really the source of bug. So basically, locate, identify, eliminate, propagate, test, watch out side effect. That's all from me about debugging. Hopefully this will help you. And finally, we reach a workshop. So we have 3 problems here. I think they are quite easy. So try to solve it. So like try to solve it, and if you can, please try to write your code. And if you have any difficulties in writing code, please tell me. I will help you. So is everything okay? So I will never see the problem. And let me know if you have any difficulties. These three problems are quite easy, and I think you don't need to break down to steps or anything. Just give your solution and try to like rephrase into a pseudocode. And when you have difficulty translate pseudocode to code, I can help you. It's more important to have a solution into code than know how to like write pseudocode into code. Okay, wish you luck. Let me hide myself.
So if you guys try the solution right, so in the trying process, you will know, you will write your answer, and you may don't know whether your answer is correct or not, but I think it's fine. We do make mistake and then learn from our mistake also. So maybe you guys can share, or if there is no one would like to share, maybe Jia Hong, you can share your answer.
Yes, okay too. What about this? I share my thought process. So so from what we see from the integer to normal numeral, we can notice that these Roman numeral are actually shorted descendingly. So it's 3n, like mean 1000, and then cm 900, and then l 50, and then x 10, and then v 5, and 3i 1. So these characters are like get decreasing. So this, and also this character will add up exactly equals to this number. So my like intuitive solution is from the provided character repeatedly find the largest character that is smaller than input number. Until characters sum up equal to the input. So here's my initial thought, and then just repeatedly rephrase so repeat until character sums up or input. So we need something to keep track of the sums up and something to keep track of input. My largest but smaller than input at the the by the character largest character. It's get the found character to sum. Is that okay? Here is basically what I've done. So well, the number is not 0, so I have max smaller index, and then I will iterate through the Arab numbers and find out the number that is smaller than input, but also the largest one. And I have the edge case. If I like go over the list, I need to take one step back, or I go to a number that's greater than the input number. I also take one step back because I want it smaller. And also, if I found the exact match, I will break the loop. So after this process, I will find out the next smaller. I can just print it. And then finally, I need to minus I need to change the number, so it eventually end the loop. Is this okay? Okay, thank you. So maybe start from next question. I will share my initial solution, and maybe you guys try to replace it until it becomes something like pseudocode. Is that okay? Actually, because we are running out of time. Okay, the second question. Yes. Oh, and also I will share the code later. Maybe in one zip file. Where's my file? So digit cancelling. Here I have an example, 49 by 98 equals 1/2. Like normally it equals 1/2. But coincidentally, if you cancel out the 9, it becomes 4 divided 8 and also 1/2. Like just cancel out the digit. That's why it's called digit cancelling. And there are exactly 4 fractions like this, including the 49/98, satisfying these constraints. So how do I do this? Since there is no input and there is no some math formula or anything to solve it, I will try to go through all possible cases and validate them. So the numerator. Have the denominator from 1 actually 2 because 1 cannot be a 1 cannot at the bottom of the fraction. So starting from denominator 2 to actually which one is my English. Anyway, from 2 to 9, enumerated from 1 to denominator minus 1. I will try to insert a number to them. So let's say there's an n over d. I want to insert a number x. I will check xn over xd, xn over dx, and x over xd. And xn and x over dx. So I will check if all of these possibilities are equal to the original fraction or not. And if yes, I just print out the original fraction. So try to make this process into code. Is that okay? Okay, thanks you for responding, really. So guys, is everything okay? So the solution I just shared is basically exactly what I do. So repeat within the range 2 to 9, and so because the range will not include the last digit, so it's 10 here. And for numerator, from 1 to denominator, and for add-in number, from 1 to 9, I brute force all 4 candidates and just check whether their value are same or not. Yeah, that's basically what I do. And by the way, if you're curious about the digits, these are the 4, like the 4 fraction the question is referring to. If you cancel out the 6, it will be 1 over 4. Cancel out 9, they will be same. Cancel out the 6, they will be same value, like that. Well, can we proceed? I assume it's yes. So here's the next question. If you repeatedly take a number, reverse it, and add to itself, most number is and now become a palindrome. Yes. You cancel the tenth. What do you mean by tenth? Oh, I'm like any digits, I mean. I mean the 10th digit. Well, not necessary the 10th one. The question did not say as long as they're the same digit, that you can just cancel it out. Where's my window? There are too many. Yeah, so but as long as they're the same digit and you cancel it out and they end up have the same value, and that will be correct. That will be one of the fraction the problem want to find. So let's take one example. 26 over 65. Get me a Python interpreter. Just divide by 65. And cancel out the 6, 2 over 5. They have the same value. Yeah. Okay, let's resume on this question. So if you take a number, reverse it as itself, sometimes the number end up become palindrome. So it's a number that if you read from left to right and right to left, they are the same number like this. 3993 from right to left, 3993. But there are some numbers that do not produce a palindrome within the first 50 iteration, and they are called the Richter numbers. And this question wants you to find out for all number from like 1 to 1000, how many Richter numbers are there? So when, so this question is quite straightforward. So I just go from number 1 to 1000 and check if the number become palindrome within the first 50 iteration of repeat and reverse, or reverse and add. So for 1 to 1000, I would 1 to 50, so 50 iteration. Number plus is on reverse. If the number is palindrome, if we can I will count it. And finally, I just print how many out of the sorry, I am a bit So the question one, number that do not produce palindrome, sorry. So if it become palindrome, don't count it. So otherwise, if it passed the 50 iteration, I will count it. So which implies there is a break inside here to break this loop, the entire loop. So for this help. Now 12 o'clock. Session 1 is ended. And I hope you learned something. So yeah, here is my solution. Let me just share it with you guys.
You can share it in the file tab.
File tab.
Yeah.
Where is the file tab?
You can go to the calendar and then it's okay, you can share with me, then I'll share it later.
Okay. So
Okay, we are going to have a lunch break right now, so make sure you guys come back for the Python game later at 2 p.m. Go and have a good lunch, and thank you, Jia Hong, for this morning session. So later we come back at 2 p.m. Is that okay? Okay, thank you, Jia Hong. Thank you, everyone. You guys can go have your lunch, and then we will come back at 2 p.m. for the Python game. Okay, thank you. See you guys later.